y'all, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Danielle, and on this channel we use smart and logical decision making to create the lives that we want. Today I want to do a bit of a review on Candace Owens' book Blackout. I literally finished the book in a day. Before I get started, please like this video if you haven't liked it already. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't subscribed already. Hit the notification bell so that you know every single time I upload a new video. And please involve yourself in the discussion down below in the comments. Please, I would love to hear you guys' opinions on the book if you read it, or what your hopes are for if you plan on reading it or you want to read it. I'll just jump right in with saying that Candace Owens' point was basically she's hoping to get the Black community to, as she say, and I quote, to escape from the Democratic plantation. Okay, essentially Candace Owens' stance in the book, she just goes through, she gives many detailed reasons and, you know, proof, facts and things of why the Democratic Party hasn't helped Black America, why the Democratic Party have no intentions of helping Black America, and why, you know, she kind of gives a background on where the loyalty to the Democratic Party, you know, comes from within the Black community, because we know it's a thing. And she also talks about, oh, y'all like my Virgo pen? Anyway, she also talks about how we should lean, the Black community should go back to more conservative, a conservative lifestyle, more conservative views. Okay, I really want you to listen and with an open mind, and read the book with an open mind, because, you know, a lot of the times we all are guilty of kind of shunning things that is out of the norm. I'm gonna try to condense basically my interpretation of which she pretty laid it out pretty plain, but of course I can't go through everything. So I'm gonna try to condense what I believe Candace Owens' stance is. What I get from my listening to Candace Owens, listening to her interviews, reading this book, is that she essentially wants to highlight where Black America went wrong in pledging allegiance to the Democratic Party. Throughout the book, she, you know, lists plenty of statistics about police brutality. She lists plenty of statistics about the Black community, and, you know, various things that we've all heard of. So I'm not gonna run down a list because we all know them. We all know them to be true. Pretty much she use those statistics to debunk our preconceived notions about the Democratic Party, preconceived notions about liberalism, about conservatism, all of these things. One of the most important things that I believe that Candace Owens tries to really drive home is that the biggest issue within the Black community is Black fathers being absentee. I totally agree, 1000%. Like, there is absolutely no arguing about that. You know, I do think Candace Owens did a good job of kind of, in certain areas, acknowledging that, especially when she would do statistics. So when she did the out of wedlock rape statistic for, you know, Black America from the 60s on up to now, the 2010s and the 20 teens, or whatever you want to call it, the varying numbers. Okay, so she also mentions white America in contrast, and that their numbers have gone up. It's just not nearly as much as the Black community. She really tackles education. She went in on more about her childhood and her upbringing, which was quite similar, well, her grandparents' upbringing and things, which was kind of similar to my family. Her, you know, her grandfather hailed from Fayetteville, North Carolina. My grandparents and parents and stuff, my grandparents and great grandparents and stuff, they were sharecroppers as well. They own land and own farms and all that kind of stuff. So I was, you know, really happy to get a little bit about her background, and where, because your background, your upbringing really kind of drives home who you are as an individual and your experiences and your outlook on the world. So, you know, she talked about how her grandfather was a sharecropper and would have to get up super early in the morning, 5 a.m. To tend the fields and stuff. You know, they had mules and all the different kind of stuff they had. So she went into a little back history of where her first introduction to conservatism came from. And so I myself came from a very conservative background, and just like most of us in Black America, a lot of us, especially who grew up Southern, or you grew up Southern, moved up North, and you still had your Southern roots and upbringing came with you, of course. So a lot of us did grow up conservative, you know, and with a lot of conservative values, and it often is a struggle for the Black community between, especially dealing with Democrats and Republicans and liberalism and conservatism. You know, it's always a thing, and it's a struggle even in my own household, having these conversations with my parents where, you know, it's always a hard choice doing elections, because especially presidential elections, because, you know, it's a battle between, you know, race, and a battle between what we perceive as race and our moral values on a human level. But anyway, so she goes into a lot of detail about the originations of the Democratic Party, how the Democratic Party were, you know, the KKK was founded by them. They were super, you know, Margaret Sanger. You know, how a lot of these liberal ideals originated from very racist, very anti-Black places. Their roots are very anti-Black and very racist, and how she kind of brings to light how the media, and we know the media is controlled by liberals, so how the liberal media sort of fed us wrong information, which we also all know to be true, and kind of twisted the narrative. Now, I will go ahead and say, you know, I'm not into politics. This is not something that I'll typically talk about on this channel. You know, I'll talk about Candace because she's a Black woman, and I think she has, it's some good learning lessons from seeing who she is and how she moves. But as far as, I did want to review the book because I was very interested in reading it as I really started to become a low-key Candace Owens fan, okay? Which I'm not a fanatic of absolutely anyone but myself, but, you know, I have started to really appreciate, should I say, the work that she does and her viewpoints and all that good stuff. I think she did a really good job in the book. Of course, you know, they have editors, of her breaking it down into chapters of the introduction is what you have to lose. Chapter 1, it was on conservatism, then on family, feminism, over civilization, socialism and government handouts, education, media, excuses, faith, culture, and the last chapter 11 was on slavery, and then she did conclusions and acknowledgments. I'm not gonna go through detail of each chapter, so this video won't be too long, but we all pretty much know the gist of how a lot of us, not all of us, but I know pretty much the gist of Candace Owens' stance. She really doesn't, she's really consistent. I do like that about her. She doesn't stray away from, you know, her talking points. A lot of her talking points in the book were the exact same talking points that she uses in every interview and every speech that she does, and when she's traveling and speaking to colleges, you know, she uses the same points and stuff. So a lot of the things that she says, I would say majority of what she say is absolutely true. I would say that everything she says has truth to it. That is a good part about it. You know, nothing she says is an outright lie, okay? She gives out statistics. These statistics are true. I 1000% agree with her on her stance with George Floyd. We all know that no one should be prematurely killed, but I think unfortunately, a lot of Black people in America and a lot of Black Americans lack the emotional intelligence to, you know, really look at a situation from every angle. A lot of that does come from, you know, the liberal media really controlling the way we see things, controlling what we see, and controlling our perception. And therefore, we're essentially triggered about a lot of things. And when you get too triggered, you can't really think logically, you can't think reasonably. And that's a detriment when you are trying to be a successful person, when you're trying to be a good person, when you're trying to be a functional person in this country. She is very, very big on not being a victim, and I 1000% agree. So she went into what really changed her, which was when, well, not immediately, but when she was in high school, and when she went through the whole thing where, you know, it ended up being a blow up in media across the state when some drunk white kids, and one of her ex-friends was upset with her for not hanging around him anymore. And he essentially called her some slurs, and it turned into a whole ordeal. And so, not to be nitpicky, I don't really particularly enjoy the way she frames some of the things that she says, but because I'm a logical thinker and a rational person, I understand what she means. So, and it is a good thing that she used that experience to kind of strengthen herself and get a grip on reality, essentially. And I'm just gonna point out a few highlights that really stuck with me. And her, you know, stance on, you know, the whole talking white and, you know, education, and how essentially Black culture celebrates ignorance and does not celebrate or perpetuate education. And I have to agree. You know, I have a great household, grew up in a Christian home, all of that good stuff. You know, a stable home, both parents. My parents have been together. I've never seen them so much as raise their voice at each other. And even in my household, you know, education wasn't pushed. Now, education was pushed a little bit more towards my brother, who was into it. But as far as me, you know, my parents, my older sister went to college. They prevented me from going away to a 4-year college because of an incident, which really put a damper in my early years, my late teen years and early years, because it was pretty traumatic. And all I wanted to do was to go to college. Now, of course, I did eventually go and get my degree and all that good stuff. But in the Black culture, if we're going to be honest, education in the Black American culture, education is not pushed, not nearly as much as it used to be when we couldn't be educated, where we would get whipped or killed for being educated. But it's not really pushed even in the best of homes for a lot of us. Now, you know, I don't need to say not all, because we're intelligent on this channel and we understand that it's not all. A lot of us don't pour into our children and their education or upkeep and things like that. We excel in basketball and sports, we excel in music and arts, but for some reason education is not just the go-to thing for us. And it really blows my mind when people call her anti-Black, or she hates Black people, or all of these racially charged things, or she's obsessed with white men. I'm paraphrasing in a, you know, respectable way, but, you know, all of these different things, when her entire career revolves around amplifying Black people and trying to get Black people to wake up and do better. So it blows my mind when people say things like Candace Owens hates Black people, or she's a racist, or she's anti-Black. Like, what? Make it make sense. Just because you don't agree with the way she expressed her Blackness, that doesn't take an ounce away from her being Black or her Black experience. You know, she just chooses not to be a victim, which I totally agree. So everybody, you know, to get into detail, you're really gonna have to read the book for yourself or listen to it on Audible. One thing that I totally agree with her on is the Democrats are wolves in sheep's clothing. I 1000% agree with that. She stresses that the Democratic Party really stifles the Black community and in a way that essentially controls us. And it is a new plantation situation. When you hand people things, they become lazy. This is the story of the Black community outside of politics, outside of Democrats and Republicans, because this doesn't mean that I'm going to be a Republican. I'm not either. But facts are facts, truths are truths, and everything she said is true, you know, or have some truth to it. Now, the things that I didn't agree with, there are things that I didn't agree with, and and it's not so much that I didn't agree with her. It's that, you know, when you have an agenda to push and when you have a point to make, you're going to manipulate, paraphrase, phrase, and just use instances, words, Bible verses, because she did that too, which was very uncomfortable for me. But you know, when you have an agenda, when you have a message to push, you're gonna word things in a certain way. You're gonna use certain words to fit your message. And I think a lot of things that Candace Owens says lack nuance, and that is where that's the bad of it. You know, she said, I believe that Candace Owens says extreme things to grab attention, you know, and in the book she goes into a little bit of how that saying, being extreme, being politically incorrect grabs Black America attention. For an example, she mentioned when, you know, it was an uproar about Donald Trump saying, you know, telling Black people they had nothing to lose as far as voting Republican, and everybody was in an uproar. And she was essentially saying that that's the kind of thing that Black people need to hear. They need something outlandish. They need something politically incorrect, because we're a politically incorrect people, to get their attention. She really strategized, and it's really methodical on her part with a lot of the way she phrases things and the trigger words she used. She mentioned Ruby Bridges, and she was talking about how they quarantine at the kids. Like, she uses a lot of words that's obviously trigger words. She lacks nuance in a lot of situations, and that is where I have to disagree with her. When she mentions that millennials and we live in an easy generation, and that when we start complaining about bathrooms and sharing bathrooms and and gender issues, that we're spoiled and we don't have anything else to be sad about. And to some degree, I do agree with her on that stance. It's true. But, you know, at the same time, she talks about how basically she phrases her words in a way that essentially says, you know, now in 2020, there's nothing stopping us. Basically, she says that slavery has no effect on us today. That is absolutely not true. Yes, it's true that we live in the best time to be Black in this country. Yes, we live in a time where, you know, we really can pull ourselves up by our bootstraps to some degree. But to say that there's not a domino effect on both sides, when the country was trying to base its economy on real estate, for an example, and they were giving away home loans for practically nothing, giving away houses for practically nothing, redlining Black people. They still redline, okay? I work in finance, you know, in the best of circumstances, even, you know, it still happens, trust me. To say that that doesn't have effect on how much easier white millennials' lives are than a Black millennial, where most of our grandparents don't even have birth certificates. Most of our parents were the first generation to even be able to have credit, where they intentionally, even now, don't allow black people to have loans. Don't allow black people to deliberately keep black people from things in a system where it's majority run by whiteness, and there is bias, period. It's biases, period. It's very intellectually dishonest to say that slavery and the remnants since slavery and Jim Crow and the civil rights movement don't have an effect on us. Sometimes Candace Owens says things that's really, really weird. Like, she mentioned, for some reason, she holds Charlemagne the God in some higher regard, and she referred to him in the book as a leader of the black community.
Who said that? Who said that? Who has been saying that? Who said that?
Huh? She mentioned being, socialism, and if black people want to live in a socialist society in America, then basically you trade your faith, you trade God for government, and nobody should depend on government. Again, that's one of those things that I'm pretty sure she understands, that most black people don't trust the government. Now, accepting government handouts and, like I understand all of that and how detrimental that is for the black community in the long run. I don't think those things should be totally you should rid the country of those things. I just think they should be policed a little bit more. The guidelines should be policed a little bit more. I think that, food stamps and such things like that should be limited. She talked about eugenics and stuff like that. And of course, I'm totally against eugenics and trying to tell people what to do with their bodies. But at the same time, what do? Do you allow people to continue to pour out babies in poverty that the government has to pay for? The government, to some degree, would be okay with that, because if they can hand you nickels and nickel and dime you and have total control over you, then that's a benefit for them. She leaves a lot of things out, a lot of important details out when she mentions Christianity, but then she also heavily advocates for capitalism. Now, if you're going to use the Bible, of course anybody can use any verse in the Bible and switch it up to their needs, but come on, does Christianity and capitalism really go hand in hand? I'm not an advocate for capitalism, but I'm not an advocate for capitalism. I'm here, I want the best life possible, period. When anybody uses Bible verses to drive home a point, because you can find an equal Bible verse to drive home the opposite point, so it's like, why even go there? Another thing that she mentioned that I absolutely don't agree with is reparations. And again, I'm not a reparations expert, but I know enough to know that. So basically, she used reparations as saying nobody now are slaves, nobody now owns slaves. Again, this ties in with the fact that there is a domino effect. The fact that white people have had a lot of things, generational wealth given to them, or the opportunities of it given to them that were deliberately withheld from black people. Pretending that doesn't have an effect on now is absolutely asinine. Like she said, her grandparents couldn't read, or great grandparents, or a lot of black people, a lot of our family members couldn't read. So saying that my grandmother, who couldn't read, who was a strict Christian, who were sharecroppers on a farm, my grandmother would always say that her children never would work on a white man's farm, and they didn't, but were poor, somewhat poor. We're sharecroppers, we're from the rural South, grew up in this era. Like, you mean to tell me that didn't have an effect on the way my parents, their upbringing? You mean the way that doesn't have an effect on my upbringing? How my parents couldn't talk to me as much about finance as my white counterparts' parents? Not everyone, of course, but it just is what it is. Now, I agree that you shouldn't use slavery. We live in a time now where slavery is not an excuse. Yes, it has an effect, But you should never use slavery as an excuse to wallow in self-pity or to wallow in a lackluster life. Never. But to not only not acknowledge the fact that there's a domino effect and there's a direct connection between our ancestors and ourselves for the bad, just like there's a positive connection for white people who had things handed to them and they're now children. Now come on, don't play games and don't be intellectually dishonest. To say that our upbringing and our ancestors, our grandparents and our great grandparents and how they were raised has no effect on us today, we of course have absolutely astronomical better chances than they do at success. But I'll give you an example, okay? My mom was about 8 or 9 before they had running water. They lived back down a long path. So when they moved closer to the road, you know, they didn't have indoor plumbing. They didn't have any of this stuff, running water, any of this stuff, okay? My dad grew up when he was a kid, they had outhouses. You know, people like, in the same way she used how little time slavery was and how far we've come, it still shows how little time in between then and now of just how it can affect us, and it has affected us negatively. Okay, so my mom they moved into a house that was on the road, at the road as they call it. So they were no longer down a long path. They had indoor plumbing. They were able to have indoor plumbing, and you know, and she was 8 or 9. Okay, my mom is not that old. My mom is in her 50s. She was 8 or 9 before she had indoor plumbing. How do you think they took baths? How do you think they cooked? They had a well. They had to get water from the well. Now, fast forward to me, born in 1987, okay, a millennial, okay, fairly young-ish. It's foreign to me. Taking showers is kind of a foreign concept to me. I grew up taking baths, okay? I grew up getting in the bathtub. I grew up taking sink baths and washing with a rag. Because my mom didn't even have running water for a long time and they were used to taking baths in tubs, that's how they raised us. So standing under running water for 15, 20, 30 minutes, however long, it's a foreign concept to my mom, and thus it's a foreign concept to me. I've taken more showers in my adulthood in the last maybe 5 years than I've taken in my entire life. We had the shower, of course, but we didn't use it. She didn't grow up using it. So that goes to show just how far we've come, but just how small of time it was. But anyway, so basically I'll go ahead and jump into my stance. Listen, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I was never a registered Democrat. Of course, I voted for Barack Obama. I don't care about politics. I absolutely don't care about politics. I think they're both self-serving parties. I think they both have idiotic ways, and I prefer to opt out of a rigged game anyway. I see a lot of things for what they are. If I choose to vote, maybe I will vote Republican. I don't know. Candace Owens definitely had great arguments and was very convincing for no longer participating in the Democratic Party. I absolutely opt out of voting, especially for the president. I can vote locally. Who knows? I'll tell you this, I've blacked out from the Democratic Party. My overall opinion is that I love the book. I'm always here to learn and to get a new perspective. I love the way she represents black women. She's a dark-skinned black woman. She's an unambiguous black woman. She can think for herself. She moves for herself. She's free. Have I decided to black out? Absolutely, okay? Thank you so much for tuning into this video. Hopefully it wasn't too long. Hopefully I stayed on task. I had so much to say. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know every single time I upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching and listen, okay? I will see y'all in the next video.